It was just in a lecture. I don't know where exactly it would be given, but there he was, and I thought, this is the guy I can work with. And I only asked him one question. I said, if one came to Harlow, would one get an opportunity to design buildings? Because that's what we were taught to do at university, design buildings. And he said, yes, you would, you said. All sorts of buildings, he said. I believed it, and it was true. And so that was, again, you can see my line is being dictated by things, isn't it? So as soon as I was qualified, I decided I would look out for a job at Harlow.
Yes, yeah.
Because in the literature at the time, Harlow, the new town, they were cutting edge. If you were a young architect, you'd want to go and work on a new town. And in Manchester, nothing was happening, and nothing did happen. I mean, I did a thesis design for the centre of Manchester, but there was no sign of anything happening, and nothing did happen for several years. And when it happened, it wasn't very good. It's different now. There's been a sort of a complete change around. I've only been back to Manchester once, but from what I know about it, it's not like it was then. But I could see nothing was happening then. It was happening in Harlow. So the first job I saw advertised, I applied for. It was at a salary of £500 a year, and I think it was a temporary job. I never heard anything about that later. But so I came and had an interview, not with Freddie Gibbard, I had it with Hamnet, who was the executive architect.
So what was that person's name?
Hamnet.
Hamlet.
Hamnet. Hamnet.
Yes, Hamlet.
Victor Hamnet.
Oh yeah. I've come across him. Victor Hamlet.
Yeah, he was the executive architect who was in charge all the time.
Right.
Freddie Gibbard, he had his office in London, private practice, and he would come out to Harlow every week for 2 or 3 days. He would be visiting and working with the planners, but he would come round the architects department and see what we were doing. So we got to know each other, and there were 3 architects departments: the industrial part, the housing, and a town centre. And I moved from one to the other. I began in the industrial part, and when I wanted to change, I went to the housing part, and finally I went to the town centre part, and I worked on the Market Square. A group of us working on the Market Square then. And then in between, I got a year off, leave of absence, because I won the Prix de Rome.
What year did you start there in Harlow?
I must have started in 52, I think. Yeah, 52. Because I went to Rome 53, 54. Over that, I went in the autumn of 53 to Rome, and I'd been at the Development Corporation a year.
Right.
They were very generous to let me go and come back, because I was going to be away for a year. And so that was a sort of a interruption. But I missed out entirely what was another most formative thing, which was the Festival of Britain.
Oh, right, yes.
After I heard Freddie speak, which must have been in the late 40s, 49, or well, it must have been after he'd done that. Then the Festival of Britain was in 1951, and if you were interested in architecture, you just had to go and see that. And so I drove from Manchester to London in a little car that I had, and especially to see the exhibition, to spend that summer again. I wasn't going I hadn't got a job. I was going down to London to see the Festival of Britain, 1951, because that was the first time, that was the first time that modern buildings had been built together.
Oh, right.
Not just an isolated one. I mean, knew in Manchester, a city like Manchester, there could be occasionally the Express building, which was of black glass, was a striking modern building, but it was an isolated object,
Yes.
as modern buildings were. But in the Festival of Britain, you saw buildings in groups and the spaces between them, and sculpture, modern sculpture, between the buildings, and that was an eye-opener. That was townscape. We've been reading articles about townscape, and that's one of my particular interests. And so that's where I went, and it was going, because I went down there and to stop at a friend's house, I met my wife to be, who was a Swede.
Yes.
And she had come over from Sweden to spend the summer in London. She was studying singing in Sweden otherwise, but she was there, and that's how we met. And once we met, that was it. we saw the exhibition together, and then in my little car we toured England more or less. We went up to Edinburgh, met my parents in Manchester, and but then in September she went back to Sweden and I went back to but again we met over the next 2 or 3 years when she was in Vienna and I was in Rome, a bit nearer than. So that's another story. But that was all part of it. I was going down to see the exhibition, but I met Brit. And then came back to Harlow. It's to Harlow that we came when we got married. In 54, we got married when I came back from the scholarship. And then I had the house in Fellmongers. And that was my first house in Harlow.
Sorry, Fellmongers?
Fellmongers, yeah.
Is that a new house or an old house?
It's a new house, a new area. It's one of the early areas.
Fellmongers, okay.
Fellmongers. It's, as you come along First Avenue, going into Harlow, it's the first area on the left, really.
Right, yes.
You know the old church is on the right, and the high flying is now on the left, and then you round into Fellmongers. And it was a 3-bedroom house at the end of a terrace. We weren't the first occupants, but it had been occupied by an architect, one of the architects of the corporation, and he'd stuck wallpaper, rather a nice design wallpaper, but he put it on the doors, you see, and. I said I'd take the house just as it was, you see, so I liked the house. And I think they were a bit relieved because to get that off the door, and the doors then were made of hardboard. They're not veneered in a way, but you could scrape off, you'd have to put a new door. So that's where we lived from 1954. But then we bought this site and built this house in 1960.
Which one?
This one.
This one?
This one.
Yeah.
This one.
Okay. Yeah.
And
overlooking the common.
Overlooking the common. Overlooking the green belt, because the green belt, which used to be the edge of that woodland, has been moved, includes the common, is now my fence line. But it was because of the tree. I mean, that magnificent tree. I mean, once you're on this site and you could see that tree, which must be about 400 or 500 years old at least, that was the view. And that's why the house is here, that's why the window is there. And that was it.
And that house over there, that's a house?
Yeah.
I mean, because this is, these houses around here, these came after this house?
Yes, because this is a cul-de-sac.
Yes.
The houses on that side were designed by the Development Corporation and built. I think they had been built. But at the end of the cul-de-sac was 1, 2 sites and then another 3 up there, private sites. And we were the first one to build on a private site.
Right, yes.
So those houses were built, and then we built this, and then that house was built. And they're all individual, and that bears no relation to this house. And he got the levels wrong. He's instead of working with the ground level, it was a water engineer, I think, who built it. And he's raised it, you know, so you have to drive up to the house, and it makes that house much higher. Anyway, that's one of the problems. That's not planning, you see. If you do plan things together, that's one thing, but if you're private sites, they can be different.
So if you tell us about working as an architect and the sort of projects you're involved with, and you know, particularly some of the bigger projects, like ones Freddie Gibbard was involved, because did you actually start working for Freddie Gibbard?
Yes, I did. Yes. Because you know, as I say, we got to know each other while I was at the corporation, and then in 1956, was it? This was an exhibition at the Gibbard Gallery.
Oh, right.
In 2008, because I wanted to put on exhibition the work that had been done by the office that he established in Harlow.
Right.
As I said, when I first went to the corporation, he didn't have an office in Harlow. He was coming from his London office to the Development Corporation. But in 1956, that's it, 1956, Frederick Gibbard found the Marsh Lane property, which would become his Harlow base, and also established a branch in Harlow of his London architectural practice. Both these acts confirmed his commitment to Harlow, whose architect-planner he'd been since 1949, and enabled him to have closer control over the design of key buildings in Harlow. I'd been committed to living and working in Harlow since hearing Frederick Gibbard talk, as I've said, about the new town in Manchester University Society of Architects in the early 50s, while I was still a student at the university, and I'd already been working at the architects department of the Development Corporation for 3 years after seeing Frederick Gibbard on his frequent visits from London, and was delighted when he asked me to join his new office, which he did, walking across the car park one lunchtime. I didn't have an interview. I only ever had one interview in my life, which was with Victor Hamnet to go and work at the Development Corporation. No, he said, come and, I'm opening a new office, you see, come and join me. So I did, and that's where I spent the rest of my working life. I was there until the office closed in 1983. And I was eventually running it.
Right. Yeah.
So that's. You see how it's been more or less a straight line.
Yeah.
And it's been with.
Yes.
Once I met Frederick Gibbard, it was with Frederick Gibbard.
So what buildings were you involved with?
It's all there.
All there. What about the lawns, for instance?
No, that didn't think no. That was done in 1951 exhibition. That was already built. One of the excursions, I'd already been down, the first time I came down to Harlow in a little MG owned by a fellow student, was 1950, I think, and then the lawns was already built.
Right.
And first parts of Harlow had been built then.
1951, really?
Yeah.
So, as part of the exhibition, 1951 exhibition, people would come out to Harlow to marvel at the lawns, would they?
No, they wouldn't. No, they wouldn't. The Festival of Britain was quite separate. That was on the South Bank site. And Frederick Gibbard, I think, could have worked with them. Casson was the architect coordinating it, but he didn't. He wasn't interested in having, I think, having a temporary buildings. So what he did was the Poplar development, the Market Square and associated buildings in Poplar.
Yes.
And that was a forerunner, very quick forerunner of the Market Square in Harlow. You can see the same relationships.
In Poplar.
In Poplar,
I know it. Yeah.
And this was a sort of thing, it got publicity in connection with the Festival of Britain, and it was things that people would go out and see. And of course they might have come out to Harlow, but there was the lawns was about the only thing, lawns and a bit of housing there, about the only thing to be seen then in 51.
And Gibbard designed the Poplar Market Square, did he?
Yes. Is it Poplar or Lansbury? I think they're close together.
Right.
But, you must check that. But it's
okay.
It's a brick.
Yes.
It's still there. There's been some alterations, but it's still there. So he didn't work directly on the South Bank exhibition, but he did do that. And but as I said, I was interested in Harlow, so when I came down this time, it was to see what progress had been made on work on the exhibition in London. You could see things being built on the site, and you could also, on the way, visit Harlow. And this is what I did, and saw the lawn.
Yes.
Where were we?
Well, we're just talking about the project you were involved with. Yes.
Yeah, and so the lawns had been done in the London office before Harlow. One of the first ones I worked on was the sports centre, which was a pioneer work, which was actually the first purpose-designed community sports centre in England.
Yes. There was lots of firsts in Harlow, wasn't there? There were a lot of firsts in Harlow.
Yeah. We designed it for nothing, and I think the builders put in a very good bid. It was remarkably cheap. I remember going to a conference later on when they were comparing price. By that time, several sports halls had been built, comparing prices. And Harlow was just off the graph. It was half the cost of the next one, and they were a bit annoyed about it. Really, they couldn't really compare. And that sports centre worked until a couple of years ago, didn't it?
Yes.
So I was particularly involved in the interior.
Okay.
You don't see any of the interior there, but those are the bricks.
These, those
are the bricks. Yeah. I'd used them on the house, you see.
These calcium silicates?
Yes, they are. Yeah. Sand limes.
Sand lime, yeah.
Sand lime. Yeah. Which don't have a good reputation with architects. Why not?
They chip, don't they?
No, it's not that. They have a tendency to shrink. They have a coefficient of expansion which is a little higher than usual, and they have a tendency to shrink, and those are the pigmented, the colour can wash out. But I discovered at Bulwell Limeworks in Nottingham that they did a special purpose white, SPW, special purpose white, designed to be particularly strong and little moisture movement, and they used those in basements and foundations for factory chimneys even. And when I saw them, I like the look of them, and that's a through colour which goes right through, and with a matching joint, and the joint has to be weak, not too strong a joint. And I thought, well, this is a brick you can have inside or outside. And so I brought them here. I've used them wall in the front, and consequently, the whole interior of the Harlow Sports Hall is built in that brick. And there are one or two other buildings in Harlow. One or two, I've designed a church in Barnet, which is that brick. And it's more expensive than normal sand lime, but it isn't expensive as some of the clay bricks.
Very good.
So that sports hall was the first, and then there's the town hall, which we did. The first town hall we did in the office. And the college,
Okay.
Designed.
That's still there, that building? No, that's gone.
No, that's gone.
That's
That's
gone.
gone. That's gone.
Yeah, yeah. Mm.
And that's gone. But at the same time as doing key buildings in Harlow, you see, we couldn't just, the office couldn't survive on just
Right.
buildings in Harlow.
Yeah.
So what happened was that the work that came into the practice
Yes.
was divided between the London office and the Harlow office. And Harlow got to do jobs which were sort of north of Harlow, north and west, and the London office did things in London and around the south. So one of my first jobs, which lasted for several years, was Huddersfield College of Technology. It might be called the university now.
Yes.
But that lasted for years because there were many stages to it, and you know, one travelled up to Huddersfield, and then and also we did the Harlow College, you see, and we did the law courts in the Harlow office. I haven't got an illustration of it here. And then one of the finest buildings that we did was the Longman's Green, offices for Longman's Green publishers.
Yes.
And that was intended as a gateway to Harlow. It was the first building to be built. The station was there, the station was built, but there were no other buildings around, and there weren't meant to be any other buildings around. It wasn't on the plan. But Freddie and one of the directors, they knew each other, and Longman's Green were prepared. They wanted to move out of London, the headquarters, and it was so convenient. You see, to come out of the station, you go straight into their offices, and they were prepared to design a building which would be top quality, air conditioned, no expense spared, really. And so Freddie said, "Well, we can have it here, opposite the station." And so we built it, and it was, yeah, I mean, do you remember it at all?
I don't know. I didn't know Harlow until about 6 months ago.
Oh.
Can I have a look at the building? Thank you. That one there.
That's the one.
That's Longman's Green.
And on one side had the town park, and on the other side the boundary of Harlow, but the lovely views out into the countryside. And what the way publishers work is that they have umpteen meetings in little offices with the, you know, and the idea was that the basis of it was that there were offices grouped around a central lift and stairs and so on, and the offices would have views. I mean, to have I think to have meetings in rooms without a view, especially these sort of meetings where you had to have a break and you know, a bit of a think sometimes. Anyway, it was a fine building, and it was there for many years, and it did work as a gateway to Harlow. As you came into Harlow, you could see it along the valley bottom, you know. And I remember it being there as a sort of a beacon to Harlow as you came in. And then what happened was that the Longmans themselves were taken over.
Yeah, by Pearson's.
Pearson's.
And that building's now been replaced by...
Well, don't talk about it.
Yeah.
What it's been replaced by. Because what happened, first of all, was that it was left. Pearson's wanted a new, which they didn't build in any. It doesn't contribute to the. It's not an unattractive building, a modern attractive building, but it doesn't contribute to the town scene at all. You can't see it. Whereas all those buildings that Freddie did were in prominent positions. This is what gets me about the new town. We're losing our character. You see, we're losing the sports hall. Has gone next to the college. You see something of it. But then you get a university, but it becomes part of the college. Things are all being crowded onto one side, and they're not visible anymore. They're not sort of contributing their character as they could to the town. It's financial for financial reasons, and that's why the sports hall was demolished, so the houses could be built and finance the building of the new sports hall. And the other swimming pool too. They centralised everything and then developed for lucrative development housing.
Yes.
Anyway, that's could talk all day about that. But anyway, that was a fine building, the Longman Screen. That was one of the best buildings we did in the office. It got into the architecture magazine, but when it was empty and left, it wasn't. It began to look rather sad.
Yeah.
And the publishers argued that they could dispose of the site better if it was a vacant site, and the council believed them, and the council gave them permission to demolish them, although I'm sure it could have been converted into flats.
Yes.
So this happened, and this is one of the reasons that the Civic Society came into being, because things were happening in Harlow which we didn't like, and we couldn't do anything about it. So we didn't even have a Civic Society to make our voice heard. So we founded a Civic Society, and I was the vice chairman for the first 5 years, and then I expected that the new owners, publishers, would be building a decent building.
Yeah.
No. They didn't even build one building. They let it off in 3 different sites, substandard buildings, and every one of those buildings was objected to most strongly by the Civic Society on grounds of the design, poor design, inadequate for the position.
Yes.
And I was writing the letters, and after 5 years I got fed up and resigned because we weren't getting anywhere. And and that's what you've got as a gateway to Harlow. They can call the new housing the gateway, but the gateway to Harlow is what you see when you come out of the station. And what do you see? Not what the master planner intended.
No. So are you in this photograph here?
Yeah.
Which one
I'm
is
on
you?
the ground.
Oh, this fine looking gentleman in the middle.
That's it.
Yeah. So that was 1978, was it?
Yes.
Not when that photograph was taken.
Oh no.
No, that photograph was taken when behind us is an exhibition of Frederick Gibbard's work at the Playhouse. We had an exhibition of his work while the office was still in existence, and the Harlow office put up the exhibition, painted the walls, put up the exhibition for him, and that's a photograph of us having worked on the exhibition.
But that was 1978. Was it that photograph?
Perhaps it was.
Yes.
Does it say?
Yeah. What does it say?
A photo of the staff at the 1978.
Yeah. Well, that's when the exhibition was. 1978. And in 1983, you see, the Development Corporation, its job done, so it was thought, was wound down, packed up. And the Harlow partners, we were then, I think there were 3 or 4 partners in London and me in Harlow. Freddie had retired then. He was a consultant, but he was retired, so he hadn't had the boat. And they said they didn't think there was the future for the Harlow office without the Development Corporation.
Yes.
Probably right.